Hello and welcome. I'm Hamdard. Today, we begin our journey into the nature of law. Law surrounds us. When you stop at a red light, pay your taxes, or click I agree online, you are engaging with law. But here's the deeper question. Is law only a set of rules we follow, or is it also a reflection of justice itself? In simple terms, this lesson will help you describe what law is in practice and in theory and give you clear legal English to talk about both. By the end, you will be able to define core ideas of law, explain why people obey it, identify key structures like rules, authority, and enforcement, and analyze the difference between legal validity and moral legitimacy. This is lesson 1 in our module on the nature and source of law. In our next lesson, the distinction between law and morality, we'll ask whether something can be legal yet still be wrong, and how that tension shapes justice today. Are you ready? Let's begin. Why do we follow the law? At its core, law is a system of rules created by society and enforced by recognized authority to maintain order, protect rights, and resolve conflicts. It is not frozen ink on paper. It is a living framework that reflects values, ethics, and sometimes power. People obey law for different reasons. Some comply out of fear of punishment, that is coercion. Others follow rules because they accept the authority that gives those rules force, that is consent. And sometimes people resist laws they see as unjust, acting on moral principle. Legal English terms to be considered in this section include authority, enforcement, obligation, coercion, and consent. Authority is the recognized power to make and enforce rules. Enforcement means ensuring those rules are followed. An obligation is a legal or moral duty to act. Coercion is pressure or threat of penalty that compels behavior. Consent is voluntary acceptance of an authority or a rule. Imagine a city set a protest permit rule. The city council provides the authority to adopt it. The police carry out enforcement. Residents have an obligation to apply for a permit. Many comply by consent because they accept the city's role. Others comply under coercion, fearing fines. One more quick scene. Workplace safety rules require helmets on construction sites. The Labor Ministry has authority to issue the rule. Inspectors handle enforcement. Employers and workers share an obligation to comply by consent when they agree the rule protects them, and sometimes under coercion when they fear penalties. Let's pause and reflect. When you last followed a rule you disagreed with, was it fear, consent, or moral principle that guided you? Law is everywhere, in your commute, your paycheck, and your phone. Paying taxes expresses our obligation to society. Traffic rules protect public safety. Clicking accept online often forms a binding agreement, a digital contract enforceable by law. Emphasis like legal English terms to be considered in this section include statute, regulation, contract, and consideration. A statute is a law passed by a legislature. A regulation is a rule made by an agency to implement a statute. A contract is a legally enforceable agreement between parties. Consideration is the value each party gives or promises, making the contract binding. Picture this. You sign up for a streaming service. The click forms a contract with duties on both sides. Your monthly fee is the consideration you provide. The company's data practices must follow a privacy statute enacted by the legislature. A government agency issues a regulation explaining how that statute applies to user data. Another everyday scene. Your landlord promises to fix a leak within 7 days. That promise becomes part of your contract. A housing statute sets minimum safety standards.
A building department regulation explains how repairs must be documented. Let's go deeper, beyond courts and courts, into the philosophical heart of law. For centuries, thinkers have asked a profound question: what makes a law legitimate? Emphasis: legal English terms to be considered in this section include natural law, legal positivism, sovereign, sanction, jurisprudence, validity, legitimacy, the rule of recognition, and the rule of law. Natural law holds that true law reflects moral reason. Legal positivism says a law is valid if properly enacted by a recognized sovereign and backed by sanctions. Jurisprudence is the theory or philosophy of law. Validity asks whether a norm is legally binding. Legitimacy asks whether people accept a rule as rightful. The rule of recognition is a social test used by officials to identify valid law in a system. The rule of law is the principle that everyone, including government, is subject to law. Imagine a government passes a strict speech law. Under legal positivism, the law's validity depends on proper procedure by the sovereign and enforceable sanctions. Under natural law, the law could still be illegitimate if it violates moral reason. Courts and scholars debate this in jurisprudence, asking whether the law deserves public legitimacy. Consider natural law. Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas argued that unjust rules are not truly law. Lex injusta non est lex. Their insight echoes today in human rights and ethical AI debates, reminding us that rules should align with moral reason and human dignity. Picture a policy that denies services to a minority group. The policy might be enacted properly, yet a natural law view asks whether it violates the inherent worth of persons. Natural law encourages us to test legality against a deeper measure. Does this rule respect human flourishing? Now, positivism. John Austin and H.L.A. Hart shifted our focus from morality to authority and social facts. For them, a law is valid if created by the proper source, recognized by officials under a shared rule of recognition, and backed by sanctions. This clarity is powerful. It lets judges, legislators, and administrators identify law without moral disagreement blocking action. In digital governance, positivism supports reliable compliance. Systems can check whether a regulation was enacted, published, and authorized, then apply it consistently. The sociological and realist views bring us back to the ground. Roscoe Pound and Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. argued that law is what courts and people actually do, not merely what books say. If data shows that similar defendants receive different sentences, a realist asks what is driving the real outcome: judicial discretion, local norms, implicit bias. Holmes suggested that the law is a prediction of what courts will do, a practical guide more than a perfect theory. Analytical and critical approaches offer two sharp lenses. Hans Kelson's pure theory of law imagines a logical hierarchy of norms, a system that explains law by law itself, anchored by a basic presupposition sometimes called the Grundnorm. Think of it like a house. The walls and roof only stand because of the foundation. Without it, the whole structure collapses. Critical scholars reply that law often mirrors power and ideology, that rules can appear neutral while producing unequal results in practice. Ronald Dworkin adds a third path: law as integrity. Judges should decide hard cases by interpreting legal principles in their best moral light, seeking coherence across the whole legal system. Lon Fuller points to the inner morality of law: generality, publicity, clarity, prospectivity, and congruence between rules and enforcement, arguing that without these features, law collapses into arbitrary command. And John Rawls reframes justice as fairness. Imagine choosing rules behind a veil of ignorance. Not knowing your status, would you still accept those rules? Consider a sentencing algorithm that produces harsher outcomes for minority defendants. Legally valid under current procedures? Possibly. Morally just? Maybe not. The case shows why we still need both positivist structure for clarity, and natural law ethics for justice, plus
realist data to expose patterns, Dworkin's principled coherence, and Fuller's inner morality to keep law from becoming arbitrary.
if you were the judge, how would you balance validity, legitimacy, and evidence of bias? I will pause for a brief moment so you can shape your answer.
Think of law as a bridge between two worlds. One world uses rules to keep order, the other uses values to seek justice. Without philosophy, law can become mechanical. Without practice, philosophy remains a dream. Legal English terms to be considered in this section include validity, legitimacy, rationality, and proportionality. Validity means a rule is legally recognized or binding. Legitimacy means people accept that rule as rightful. Rationality is the reasoned logic supporting a decision. Proportionality asks whether a measure is suitable, necessary, and balanced against the right it limits. Here is the simple truth. We need language to analyze where law and philosophy intersect. Consider an AI bail system. Even if procedurally valid and rational in design, its legitimacy may be questioned if outcomes disproportionately affect certain communities. A proportionality review would examine whether less intrusive alternatives could achieve the same safety objectives. The simple truth remains: law may function without philosophy, but it cannot justify itself. Across history, legal systems repeat a timeless triangle: rules that guide behavior, authority that gives rules their force, and enforcement that ensures compliance. From Hammurabi to Roman law to modern constitutions, the pattern endures. Today, AI assists with drafting, research, and prediction, but even cutting-edge tools still depend on the same pillars. A court requires jurisdiction to hear a case. Precedent guides similar future cases, and sanctions secure obedience to lawful orders. While technology changes the form, the structure of law remains strikingly stable. Imagine a federal appeals court reviewing a new privacy dispute. It has jurisdiction over the case. It relies on precedent from earlier privacy rulings to interpret the statute. If a party violates the court's order, the court can impose a sanction. Centuries change the form, clay tablets become digital ledgers, but the triangle remains. Legal English terms to be considered. Jurisdiction, a court's legal power to hear and decide a case. Precedent, an earlier decision that guides future cases. Sanction, a penalty or reward used to secure compliance. Why do people obey the law? Three motives appear again and again: coercion, fear of penalty; consent, acceptance of authority; morality, belief that the rule is just. Legal English terms to be considered in this section include compliance, legitimacy, civil disobedience, and procedural justice. Compliance means following a rule or order. Legitimacy is the public's acceptance of authority as rightful. Civil disobedience is the deliberate, non-violent breach of a law to protest its injustice. Procedural justice is the sense that the process was fair, that people were heard and treated with respect. Think of a policy that restricts public gatherings. Many people show compliance because they view the rule as necessary or because they accept the government's legitimacy. Others engage in civil disobedience to reveal the rule's flaws, aiming to inspire reform. When people feel heard, legitimacy grows and compliance becomes more stable. As we close Lesson 1, let's step back. Law is both structure and story, a system that connects behavior, authority, and conscience. Practically, law maintains order with rules and sanctions. Philosophically, it mirrors what we believe to be right. Every statute raises a question. Is it law because it exists or because it is just? Our journey connected daily life to deeper ideas and built a precise legal English to describe both. You saw how a rule may be valid under procedure yet lose legitimacy when it violates fairness. You learned to ask, what is the rule? Who has authority? What enforces it? And does the result earn our moral acceptance? Here is a brief reflection. Think of one moment
where law and morality either agreed or conflicted. Describe what happened, which rules applied, which values mattered. Use at least 3 legal English terms from this lesson as you explain your reasoning. In our next lesson, the distinction between law and morality, we will ask whether something can be legal yet still be wrong and how that tension shapes justice in our modern world. Until next time, observe how law and morality shape the choices you make and the societies we build together.